I have a very special interview with someone today, someone I have been waiting to interview for a very long time, and I'm so grateful that Suzanne Freeman is with us today. Suzanne wrote a book about her near-death experience in 2004. Chad Daybell was your publisher. Is that right, Suzanne? And
yes.
Yes, and someone that you considered once a friend before a falling out years later. And the falling out consisted, and I'll share this because it's public and this is well known, but you wrote Chad Daybell an email as one of your last correspondence with him that told him that his beliefs or the direction he was going to lead to death and sorrow. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I had no idea he would do what he's done, though. I thought it would be different.
Yeah, when you wrote that, you weren't picturing this.
No.
You just knew that he was going a direction that you did not feel good about. In fact, we should say now the reason you agreed to this interview, a long form interview. And as you mentioned, you've done interviews for the media before, but no one's done a long, form interview with you that we're going to share with our followers. And the reason you decided and were willing to do this was for Tammy Daybell.
Only
so let's
for
share
Tammy.
that. Only for Tammy.
I just felt I should. It was this pressing thing. I've got to talk to Lauren. I just felt I should. And it's really for Tammy. Really for Tammy. She has to have a voice. And her family cannot speak out. This is my belief, and maybe correct me wrong. The Daybell kids will cut them off because they believe that their dad's innocent. So
that's possibly true. Yeah, I don't know. That speculation is valid. I don't know anything else.
Well, and I
can say, but that would make sense. And from the very beginning, Tammy's family has requested privacy. They've made it very clear that they hope justice is served, but have requested privacy and have done that. And I respect that. But you're right. That sometimes means that Tammy might not be discussed as much.
I got a nice little message from a family member, a direct family member of Tammy's, and she thought with the Nate Eaton interview, she was so glad. And she says, you described Tammy to a T. And she said, we miss her every day.
Oh, Tammy, she was a sweetheart. I think she was the heart of the business. She just really was good at and really kind and really genuine.
And that made me feel like, all right, I am doing the right thing. I don't love it. I don't seek to be on camera. It's not natural for me. I avoid photos. It just isn't natural for me to be on camera. But this has been so devastating. I mean, it has affected my life in a way that most of the time I avoid it. I just like, oh, there's Chad Daybell in it because it really makes me mad. I had conversations with him, many conversations about spirituality, and I just found him very humble. I found there's some personality things that I kind of question, like he had a hard time laughing. I don't know if that's an issue or not, but he had this way he held back in his laugh, and I always wondered, why is it that he can't just laugh? I don't know. It just, being in social work, the psychology, so you kind of wonder. I mean, that was before I ever did that. So anyway, I wondered about that, and I thought he was a good man. I really did, and I felt that him and his wife made a really good team. I remember when I met Tammy the very first time was when my first book was almost printed, and she had read it, and she was sitting at a desk, and I came in with Chad, and he says, hi, Tammy, this is Suzanne Freeman. And she stopped like this and got up, and she's like, oh my gosh, I want to meet you. I loved your book. And I kind of was taken aback because I'm like, Is that? I'm just my story. It wasn't that big a deal, but I was excited. How excited she was about that. I thought that was really actually quite cute when you really. She was just so genuine, and I mainly dealt with Chad, but she was very genuine. I'm heartsick over what happened.
Let me give a little bit of your background where you are now, because you're right. Suzanne's book was written in 2004. We hear a lot about you. In fact, take a listen to this interview of Chad talking about Suzanne's book.
So I went down to Sanpete County where Suzanne lived and interviewed her. Doctrinally, I wanted to make sure she was on track. And I found out she grew up dyslexic. She had never really read any books. She's just a wonderful stay-at-home mother with 8 children. And but when she was there on the other side of the veil, the Savior told her that she needed to someday write her story. So this was 7 years later, and after I had cross-examined her enough, I felt confident about it. And that's when we put together first her book called Led by the Hand of Christ, which is more focused on her experiences in the spirit world.
It follows along really closely with like LDS church doctrine and that kind
Absolutely. She's a very faithful LDS woman. And like I say, I felt good about it because it stayed right on course with the LDS doctrine, even though Suzanne wasn't much of a scholar herself. And so that verified to me that it was accurate and had actually happened.
A lot of people noticed when we shared this interview, Suzanne, he talks a lot about you, that he was, to say what one listener said, a bit condescending. Another listener said sexist. Almost, I mean, you just called yourself a simple Susie, but here you are, you're going towards, you've raised 10 children. You're single now, is that right?
Yeah.
Divorced and going for a career in social work at this time.
Hospice social work.
Hospice social work. Such
That's
a
my
beautiful,
goal.
noble thing. Thank you. Thank you for doing that for so many that are in need of that. And so I just want to point that out too, that as Chad called you, just a mom and uneducated, this is not the Suzanne Freeman that I have met and been talking to. I have been talking to a very interesting woman who is educated, who is concerned about learning and has wisdom. So with that being said, I would not call you the things Chad called you back in that 2011 interview. I would call you educated, smart, wise, and I'm looking forward to this interview with you.
Thank you.
So you met him. That was interesting. You felt he was humbled. You saw a concern that
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
he never laughed. He could never just laugh, or he
It was
held
really
back.
it was strange, gotta admit.
Story, and I felt good about it.
Yeah, that is strange. You know, it's something that my husband, a psychologist, and I have also noticed. He
Really? Okay.
yeah, well, not the laugh in particular, but the sense of humor. And he would write about his sense of humor. You know, he would say that he would write jokes into his books.
One Foot in the Grave by Chad Daybell. So it's a lot of little stories like that of incidents you had there at the
it's
cemetery.
mainly aimed at their humorous stories, and they're not offensive.
And we do have a speech given at a Preparing a People conference where Chad makes the audience laugh.
I ended up with 20,000 steps on my Fitbit from just the snow blowing, so it's helped thin me down a little. So, for example, here.
I don't really find his jokes very funny, even though I do understand them. His sense of humor was a little bit difficult, I think, to understand.
I put myself through a lot of trouble. I'd go out in the field in the rain, you know, you have to sacrifice or something. I'd go kneel down in the mud and pray, and nothing would happen. Go out in the pigeon pen and pray and things like that.
I don't think he was as humorous as he made himself out to be. He would talk more about a sense of humor than show it. When you talk, right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I never knew him to have a sense of humor. He was always very, very serious.
Okay.
When I was 17, teeth were a little straighter by now. I'll just briefly tell about my near-death experiences. I've told him enough that I don't need a whole lot of details.
That,
Thank you for validating that.
yeah, I never knew him to have a sense of humor. And I sat with him on book signings. And I mean, I probably professionally probably know him better than most anyone. Because he was one of the first books I was one of the first books he published. So
Right. And tell me about that. So how did you two meet?
it was through an author. I had met her at a event for the church, and she was selling her books, and I just felt that I should tell her that I had an experience. I had just been writing it down. And I told her a little bit of it, and she called me after a week or so after. She says, I just can't get you out of my head. I think we can get this book published. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I didn't believe it so much, because how do you get a book published, And so she contacted a few, and Chad replied back. And then he drove clear to Ephraim, where she was living at the time. And I was living in a town, Spring City, next to that town. And he met up with us, and we discussed it, and he felt good about it, as he said. And so we started. She was the ghost author. I didn't feel
Can I ask
comfortable.
her name?
Yeah, Shirley Bowman.
Okay. So she was the author. So Chad wasn't even the author. You had a ghostwriter who was Shirley.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a much better book. It's a good book. She did a very good job writing it. I can say that because I didn't write it, really. It was just my story. But she made it a very beautiful story. She really was able to write the characters, and some of it was kind of made up. She had to write dialogue in and stuff, which really isn't. My family just like, oh my gosh, Mom, that's not how we talk. But how do you tell an author, well, sorry, that's not how we talk, you have to rewrite it? I just didn't think it was beautiful the way she did it. So
as long as it was accurate, you were okay with some
the dialogue didn't matter,
over
as long as
you.
my experience was accurate.
Yeah. In other words, you're glad Chad didn't write your book.
Oh, I could barely get through his first book of The Last Days. I just bad writing. I'm sorry. It's been 18 years. I've known him 18 years. My number 9 child was 3 months old when I met him, and he just turned 18. So it's been so upsetting, because I've had personal conversations with him, and now I look back, there was some red flags, but I didn't think they were that big of red flags. So, I mean, we had conversations.
Hindsight is 2020.
Oh, well, I did not believe that when he made the national news that kids are missing, and he's married some woman 2 weeks after Tammy died. I thought, oh my gosh, this is just not true. It can't be true. Because
even then after you're falling out and everything, you still thought, no way did the Chad Daybell.
No, I didn't believe it. Because we had conversations about Tammy and him. Like, I mean, we have spiritual books. My books, near-death books, 3 of them he published. So we had conversations, probably monthly, because I was getting, maybe, there'd be 6-month span. I didn't talk to him, but
Julie Rowe mentioned while writing her book that she would talk to him every day. Is that similar?
I didn't talk to him every day. I had a lot of kids. It wasn't that, just publish my book, be done. I did. And plus, I guess they collaborated on their books. So, which I can see why Julie's book is the way it is. Sorry.
We'll get into that. Yeah. Soon.
Yeah.
There.
So, we had conversations how Chad really felt him and Tammy were soulmates. And I know it was twice, at least. I think it was 3 times that he just reiterated a couple times that, yeah, I really felt very strongly that I knew Tammy in the pre-existence. We talked about this. And so I thought there's no way that he would have gone off and married 2 weeks after his wife died, that they were soulmates. Nah, I don't believe it. I just didn't believe it because we had those conversations.
To validate what you said, his autobiography, which was it 2018 that his autobiography was published, and he dedicates it to Tammy, his one and only.
I'll believe it. I felt there is one thing I thought was odd about him. It's almost like he was obsessed religiously or something, because his publishing company was only going to publish LDS books. And I thought, if you're going to be a publisher, why don't you spread out and not just do LDS books? I found that a little odd to me. I remember thinking, why? And he ended up losing his company because Deseret Book decided they weren't going to keep any of non-Deseret books in LDS in the Deseret Book and Seago. So he actually lost his business because of it.
When was that?
2010, maybe? I can't.
That would make sense. That was right around the time that he did that interview with you. It was about a year later, and he did mention having to go back to work as a cemetery sexton. Okay, yeah. That would make sense. Okay.
But when the economy went in the tank in 2008, we had to drastically reduce our company to a part-time operation.
Oh, I see.
And
so Spring Creek Books still there. You published your volume 5 of Spring Creek Books.
And we still publish.
But you're not doing your distribution now?
Right, we've changed that to a distributor, Brigham Distributing, which has worked out very well for us. But so suddenly I needed a job to pay the benefits for the family and everything.
Yeah, he didn't even admit to me that he had to file bankruptcy. I got a letter from an attorney saying, and Chad kept saying, so he didn't have the guts to even say, hey, sorry, we've had a hard time with our business. We are going bankrupt. So I called him afterwards. I said,
because you got a letter.
Yeah, I got a letter from the attorney. And so I called him, and he told me, yeah, but I'm going to keep publishing your books. I thought, okay, fine. Because I wasn't going to, I don't know, for some reason it wasn't, I mean, there's my story. People read it. It's so sacred. It's very hard sometimes. So to put myself out there, and it was easier in a book than go speaking. And it was hard for me to leave all my kids. I mean, the second book was written just before my 10th child was born. So I was busy.
He publishes your books. You have this writer. You then learn about a bankruptcy that he lost his publishing company due to Deseret Book, which is owned by Bonneville Communication. Bonneville Communication is owned by the church. Thus, the LDS bookstore was saying, hey, your books are a little too much for us. We can't control what's in them. We're going to just kind of stick to certain publishers.
And that might be why. I don't know.
You don't know.
My books were not in Deseret Book. They were in Seagull Book. They did go in a Seagull Book.
Okay.
So
he lost the publishing company, filed for bankruptcy, but then said he would still publish your books. Then what happened?
Some time went by, and we ended up moving from Sanpete County to Provo, so it was a little easier to get books. And I really didn't have any issue with him until he started publishing Julie's books. And
what year was that when he started publishing her books?
2011, I think, 2012.
Okay.
Well, the issue, so backstory a little bit. I had gotten my hands on a manuscript of Roger K. Young's, I don't know, Dreams and Visions of the Last Days or something. So
Roger K. Young actually is someone important, and we haven't really discussed him on Hidden True Crime yet. Could you kind of share who Roger K. Young is a little bit and his book? He is a founder of Avow. He sold Avow to Christopher Parrott, who we know more about because Christopher Parrott is now the owner of Avow and was friends with Chad Daybell. But Avow was started by a man named Roger K. Young, who wrote a book. Is that right?
Right. He wrote a couple books. About the time my second book was coming out in 2006, it seems like, Through the Window of Life, I got a manuscript from, I don't know who, but someone handed me this manuscript about dreams and visions of the last days. And I think that's the title, but I can't remember. But one of in it talked about, and he named it The Call Out. And I read through this and I'm like, that just can't happen. It can't happen that way. It just can't, because so
to explain to those who aren't familiar with the call out, this is really important.
it is.
A vow very much is focused on this website that Chad Daybell was on, owned by Christopher Parrott, was very much about dreams and visions and this thing called the call out. Can you explain what the call out is?
Really short version is times are going to start getting hard. There could be a war, or there could be the government getting wicked, telling us what to do, controlling us more. And he talks about needing your food storage, and the prophet is going to go down the chain of command, like go to the stake presidents, and the stake presidents will talk to the bishops. And it's going to say that, okay, those of you who have a temple recommend, I'm not sure that is in Roger Young's part, but it's been kind of.
The call out's evolved. What the call out
yes.
is has evolved, but you believe it started with Roger K. Young's book.
Yeah. Oh, I know it did. And,
Okay.
And then what they're going to say is there's trucks going to come and pick up all your food storage, and you're going to go to the girls' camps.
Girls' camp meaning young women in the LDS.
Women
in the LDS church are ages 12 to 18. They go on summer camps.
Yes.
They go to summer camp, and some of these summer camps are perhaps owned by the church or at least familiar to the church. And they're saying that there's going to be this call out for those that have prepared, and they're supposed to go to these camps.
Yep.
But not everyone in the LDS, not all of the LDS members know this. It's just these special people that know about it on a vow.
And they especially think they're special. That's for sure.
They think they're special, so they understand the call out.
And they spend thousands of dollars. They buy the white tents, especially when Julie came out and said that. They call them white tents, but they're canvas heavy-duty tents that you can live in through the winter and stuff. But you buy it, you can buy camp stoves for them to keep them warm, that sort of thing.
How much do those tents cost?
Couple thousand.
Wow.
And not to mention, you had the wood stove, and of course, they're saying you can buy beds for them. Oh my gosh. They could fill one semi at least with all the stuff that they prep.
Do you think, by the way, that Julie was maybe ever getting a kickback on some of these supplies, like affiliate links saying, hey, buy this tent, and everyone's buying it through her?
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure that she figured out a way to get a kickback. Maybe not, but Julie is quite business savvy. I must admit that. She knows how to get a following. So when I read this Dreams and Visions, and, I try to be respectful, but I specifically told Chad about this. I handed him the manuscript. He copied it.
This is the Roger K. Young book.
Yes. He copied it. And I said, there's a call out dream in that, and that is not going to happen. And he laughed with his little quirky little hold back laugh. There is something wrong with that. And listening to what Dr. John has said, he has an issue with laughing. I've noticed. I don't know why. And we laughed about that. Yeah, okay. And I said, don't listen to any of that stuff. That's not true. That just can't happen. And I did explain to him that the prophet it just won't happen that way. And
that the prophet won't do this call out thing.
It's kind of like,
don't believe in this call out is what you were saying in this Roger K. Young book.
I told him not to believe it. And
what year was this?
It had to be 2006, around
Okay.
there.
Okay. Thank
Maybe
you.
2007. It's kind of like, for the listeners out there, it's kind of like if the president of the United States had something he wanted done, he doesn't go talk to a private. He talks to the generals and they go down. So this dream doesn't make sense to me, that some person would get a dream of what the prophet's going to do. Do you see what I mean?
Roger K. Young is having a dream about what the prophet of the LDS church, the leader of the LDS church, is going to do when he needs members
To listen.
To listen. Yeah, it's interesting. I have not heard of the call out myself until this case, just so everyone knows.
That's good. It wasn't that. It's a thing people believe in, buying food storage, and even Chad told me himself. But I had several conversations with Julie about Julie. That he says, no, Julie isn't into prepping like that. Why would she? That's just so funny. I don't even do that either. And I thought, but that's what her book's about. If she's not into prepping, I mean, why is she, saying, Paul, you have to have a, it just did not make sense to me. None of it. And so Chad kept telling me, oh, you need to meet, why don't you just read her book? Why don't you meet her? And I had a dream. I had a friend of mine say, will you meet her? See what you think. Something doesn't feel right. And I was going to. She had come to Utah one of her first times to speak in Springville. Chad had set it up. And I was getting nervous because I thought, first off, if someone in that really popular, I could take away her, her limelight, and she might be uncomfortable with that. Because I don't like going into a place and, stealing someone's limelight. I mean, that's not what I plan on doing. But there's something I was afraid what I might see. I can be intuitive, and so that night I had a dream that I lived in this really old house, but the basement opened up kind of like a garage kind of thing. And she was going to come to speak. And they set up these old chairs, and it was kind of like dank and kind of dirty down there anyway. She came and she was short. And I thought she was taller after the dream, but her face was distorted. And after everyone left, they brought food and they just left it on the floor and left their junk. And I thought, okay, I don't think I'm going to go to her. I don't think that was just, it could have been nothing. But for me, I just was uncomfortable with it anyway. And I had read a chapter of her book. I just couldn't read it anymore. She talked about Adam and Eve and how, she saw how Cain killed Abel was because Adam's and Eve's daughter's skirts started getting shorter and stuff like that in her book, the very first of it. And I thought, this is ridiculous. This is not what happened. And Chad kept begging me to read it. Why don't you just read it? And he even told me, and this is what he told me, you don't have to believe me or not. He says, I don't know why people like her book so much, because it's really not that good. It's not as good as yours. And I thought, well, you published it and you seem to really like it. So I think you're just trying to butter me up a little. I mean, that's really
interesting, though. If he also didn't think it was even that great, yet he continued to publish them, because Julie Rowe was his most popular author, and he did make a lot of money off of Julie Rowe's book.
Well, he must have made a lot of money off of me, because he would not give me my rights back. Just wouldn't.
Wow. To this day, you still don't have the rights to your book.
No, I don't. But they're out there for free. And, he's got other legal problems that he's not going to come after me to sue me. So, and I could sue back and say,
right.
I've gone to an attorney about it. And he told me, and I trusted him. And signed. This was on my third book. And the agreement we had together was only one-sided. The attorney read through it. He says, I have never seen a contract between an author and the publishing company this one-sided. There's nothing in there for you. I thought he was an honest man. But you can't go to be a murderer and not live a certain life to get there. You have to not follow the teachings that's in the scriptures, teachings of Jesus Christ. You have to follow his teachings, because especially if he, you know, has done what he's done in the church, went through the temple, all that stuff, you have to follow the commandments or you can be led astray. He had to know what he was doing was wrong. Everybody knows what's right and wrong.
So that humble man you knew, do you look back and see humility still, or do you see manipulative, or what do you see?
I see
now?
manipulative. I see controlling. I see he wanted the limelight. He didn't want to be the publisher. Of course he wrote books. He didn't want to be the publisher. But that's all he could do, because no one would publish his books but himself. And Tammy's the one that did the designing of my books. And everyone that looked at my book said, wow, that's really a good design of cover. That's a really good cover. All three of my books. And they liked how they did my daughter's graphic designer. And she's like, wow, I like how the letters, the kind of fonts that she used. And they had to buy a certain font that really looked good on my Spirit of Liberty book. And she's like, wow, this is really well done. This is a well done cover. And I'm pretty sure she did the editing. I'm pretty sure. I don't know really what Chad's role was, whether than he just bought the books. And really, honestly, maybe he read the books and decided, yeah, we should publish this one. But
so in other words, Tammy was doing all of the work.
Tammy was the heart and soul of the business. Chad never could have done it. And I pretty much knew that most of the time. I felt that they were a pretty good team, but I knew Tammy was behind the scenes doing making her the business. It wouldn't have been as good without her, for sure.
In other words, and she was already working a full-time job as a librarian for the school district, and she was raising 5 children, and she was running the publishing company. And we have heard this from many people, right? She was essentially doing everything.
She was the heart and soul of the business, for sure. Chad would never have gotten as far as he did without her, for sure, without question.
Let's go back to the call out really quickly, if that's okay, and Roger K. Young, because this is helping me as well as a few others kind of understand how this evolved. There's how Chad went from being your publisher to Julie Rose to writing his own books. And there's also how did Chad get his platform? And that has to do with Avow. And that's where he met Julie. Were you a member of Avow too?
Short time. I was on there, and it's just pettiness. One person posted, I can't wait for the call out. And I'm rolling my eyes. I'm like, are you serious? You really think the call out's going to be that great? Living in a tent, hardly having any running water, people fighting over their food storage. I just didn't.
That is interesting. So someone said they couldn't wait, almost as if they were prepared and felt special, maybe.
I think that's what it was. I think they felt they were more special because they were more prepared, that their eyes were open. They're open to spirituality, and they're open to being prepared. And so when the call out happens, they're going to listen to the prophet. And if I said anything about it that made me look like I was like this Jack Mormon that didn't believe in the prophet anymore. And,
that's how extreme it was. If you weren't believing in this extreme belief, then you must have been some inactive rebel Mormon.
Oh, yes. You have to believe the prophet's going to do this. Don't you believe that the prophet has visions and dreams? And don't you believe the prophet's going to take care of us? I'm like, it's not like that. It's not like that.
So Roger K. Young, you said, again, for everyone to understand, Avow is a site. And for those that are interested in learning more about Avow, Anna is a great interview to go to. Anna is someone I interviewed who was a member of Avow for 10 years and talks a lot about Avow. Roger K. Young started Avow. He wrote this book, Dreams and Visions.
I think Dreams and Visions of the Last Days. I think
of the last days, where he discussed the call out, and then the idea of the call out evolved on the groups. You believe that it was Roger K. Young that started this belief. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
He, started the website, but not only the website, he would have like preparedness expos, and they were big, and people with Humvees and all the preparedness thing, water filtration stuff, would come to those.
Was this before Preparing a People?
Yes, it was way before. By the way, I was never invited to Preparing a People.
Oh,
I was an outcast.
congratulations.
Thank you. I'm glad to be an outcast in that, because I'm not running, and I'm not ashamed of what happened. There's some people that are should be accountable for Chad's ideas, because they were complicit to them.
Who?
Nancy and Mike James. They're the ones that did Preparing a People. Chad had a platform. He didn't have a platform before.
To Preparing a People conference announcement with Chad Daybell, one of our main speakers.
They were close with Chad. I don't care what they say. I have a friend that moved to Idaho, and she would tell me that she knew Nancy quite well. And Nancy just out and out told her one day, well, Suzanne's just jealous. And she's like, oh, that's further from the truth, Nancy. That is further from truth. And I thought, well, if Nancy says I'm jealous, she got that from Chad because of my email, which I honestly thought I deleted. I didn't think it was pretty explicit telling him. I just wanted him to know, I want my rights back. I don't want any part of what you're doing. But I did not know he believed in, I'm sorry, he believed in reincarnation. People can change the name, but it's reincarnation. And I don't want to.
Multiple probations, past
I'm
life,
not even
reincarnation. Same, you're saying.
It's the same thing.
Chad's one of my favorite people. In fact, he used to be in Springville, and then we followed him to Rexburg. Yeah.
There was this gentleman that has since passed away. His name is Doug Mendenhall. And he had a daughter that they didn't know she was diabetic. She went into a diabetic coma at 11. About the same time I had my NDE in 1999. And she came back gifted, seeing Christ and all this stuff. So he started these same thing, Preparing a People. I always see it. Someone else is going to come up and do the same thing. So basically what I saw Chad doing, I saw what Doug did. But Doug was different. He was a polygamist. He used to drive around, and before I knew this, he used to drive around with this other woman alone in their van. And I always thought that was highly inappropriate. So my guess was, before I knew about Lori, I figured Chad would probably start becoming a polygamist. That was pretty much the next thing that I would see. Doug Mendenhall's group started getting into they used to call it multiple mortalities. And the weird thing is, Doug used to kind of criticize people who would say it, and Chad at first did too. He would say, why would people say they're coming back as someone popular? Their names in the scriptures, or they're Thomas Jefferson or someone.
So I actually interviewed a man named Dustin Thane who had the experience of Chad coming over and being dubbed someone important, or a couple people in past lives. Take a listen.
Chad asked if he could speak with me. We're from the same town. He lives up the road a little bit. An acquaintance. I did not know him well. So he came over with a friend. They asked to speak with me away from my wife, which was a little odd. They took me to a place in my house, and he began to explain what he had been into and a pendulum. And he was asking these questions. But yeah, he told me that I was Andrew the Apostle, and I think it was Heber Kimball. He listed a bunch of others.
I thought, well, there's got to be some truth to it, because so many people believe in it.
So many people involved. I actually asked Dustin about this too. Here is more of our interview.
I clearly you weren't very involved, but can you give any idea? Were there Chad followers, or are there sort of followers of this belief system still in Rexburg?
I believe yes. We try not to get too involved in that, but I believe yes, as far as backing that up.
When you say that a lot of people believed in multiple probations, past lives, and so you started to question maybe it's true, how many people do you say believe in these beliefs that aren't they? And let me confirm, are these mainstream
They're
LDS
not
beliefs?
mainstream.
I mean, it caused a lot of stir with a lot of people in a community, you know? I don't know.
No, yeah,
Yep.
thank you for sharing that. And it's one thing to not want to be involved, but it's another to share the truth too, so that we can stop, things or expose things. So thank you. I'm sure it's not comfortable to talk about something you don't believe in and don't want to be a part of, but I also appreciate you not, pretending it doesn't exist either.
No, I think it's there, unfortunately, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think people take a little truth and it gets so mingled with garbage and they forget what they're even following in the first place. I don't know. It's very, very sad.
People get together. They really want to, I guess what Chad would call it is get the meat, or what I've heard is they want to know the meat of the gospel, not just the, what does the prophet say? Or they want to, not just what the scriptures say, delve deep into the scriptures.
They don't want the appetizers. They want.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
The medium rare steak. Eric Smith explains this in his interview.
And I just realized there's more to be had than what's coming across church pulpits. And it, to me, like, I had to go through this little journey of overcoming some fear of doing so, because there's a bit of an expectation in LDS culture to stay in the box, and really only look for truth in things that have the church's logo on it. And that was fine. I love the church and I love the things it teaches. I just know there's more. And I started to feel safe going outside of the box.
Most of the people that do that, they start believing in reincarnation.
So where is this stemming from then? If you're saying as they get deep into these groups, they start to believe in past lives and multiple probations, as well as the call out. Where is it coming from then? What I mean is, if this group is growing, if it's still out there, how is it being spread? Who is teaching this?
Past lives are a real thing. The LDS Church does not teach that, and that's one of the reasons they excommunicated me. But I have memory of my past lives, and when I looked through the window of heaven in my near-death experience, I went through portals, and I talk about it in my books, where I actually went in real time to some of these locations and some of these points in history. Now, that's a huge claim, but I have memory of it, and there's no one that can convince me otherwise.
I did not know what Chad Daybell was up to. I knew he was making lists, that he believed in multiple probations. So do I. Join the flock. Get out of the ship Zion and join with those who want truth and who are willing to do what it takes to find it. And I'm not talking about what you can just find on YouTube or what the Mormon Church decides to put out there as a true history. You want to know some more true history about the LDS Church? Join me on my Zoom. It's free. You have to register at wasatchwakeup.com, WASATCH wakeup.com. It's a free Zoom. Right now we have 350 something people signed up. Friday, July 9th at 6 p.m. I have it scheduled from 6 to 7. I'll go as long as I feel. I know who I am. I know my mission. I will do whatever is required. I will do my part to help cleanse this planet.
She and Chad came to Rexburg at a speaking event. There were probably 2,000 people there at the Rexburg Tabernacle. And I was there. That was the first time I had seen her. I was very interested in that. And I thought it was a great meeting, well attended. And I became very curious about Chad and Julie and who these people were.
Eric, he talks about it and he says, it's in the scriptures. Well, I'd like to see a scripture. You give me a scripture.
Smith. Yeah.
You give me a scripture. Show it to me.
There are scriptural based beliefs. Even multiple probations is one of these fringe, but scriptural based belief systems. The very fact that these are not discussed kind of suggests they're taboo topics, suggests that there's some censorship. There's something that they don't want us to understand. And look, truth seekers are going to find it. There's no stopping a truth seeker.
So to clarify for those that aren't LDS, and I think I explained this a bit in Eric Smith's interview, but a part of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints theology is that humans and that people lived before we were born in the pre-existence, that we chose God's path and thus made the choice to be born to experience this life, which is a probationary state, a time to prepare to meet God. That is a scripture from Alma in the Book of Mormon, that this life is a probationary state, meaning we are here as people to prepare to meet God, and then we return to God and are saved. Is that a fair way to say it? Did I
Yes.
do that okay? Okay.
Yep.
So thus, this idea of multiple probations is not something that is in LDS doctrine, but there are these little moments of, oh, if a child is aborted or a fetus is aborted, maybe they could still have a chance to be born. But it sounds like, and as you point out, Eric Smith and others say that multiple probations is in scripture. Others say that maybe Joseph Smith discussed it in perhaps King Follett's sermon or other places, but it might have been those off the cuff comments, that your words. And now people are taking this to an extreme. Is that do you agree with that? Is that sort of what you feel?
They'll get together in their homes and, around the fireplace and try to understand these things. You're not going to stop that.
Why is it that when Chad and Lori talk about who they were past lives with, why is it people they knew that's in the scriptures or that's someone famous? Right. Why can't it be some obscure woman in Holland giving birth and died?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, a peasant, a servant, a slave. Yes. But it's not. It's Jesus Christ's best friend, and the best friend's gorgeous wife, the goddess.
Is that what they believe?
According to the love story. He knew they had been married before, and they had been close friends with the Savior when he lived in Jerusalem. So they were just besties.
Yeah, just hanging out with Jesus.
Just Jesus on dusty paths.
Just chilling with Jesus.
Yeah, James had actually served as an important position in the Lord's church, and Elena had been his beloved spouse and best friend. So James was this important man, and then Elena was his beloved spouse. They were very close to the Savior, Jesus, and yes.
Can you imagine the type of person you must think you are to think that you're best friends with Jesus? Because in reality, Jesus had his, really close friends, but if you walked up to him, he would be your best friend at that moment. You know what I mean? Oh my gosh,
he loved everyone, according to the
He loved
scripture.
everyone, treated everyone the same. He really did. And he does.
So this call out, sorry, going back to this, you're helping us really put some puzzle pieces together. So while I know this isn't your complete story with Chad, you're helping us put some puzzle pieces together about this belief system and how it might have evolved. And I really appreciate that, Suzanne. So thank you.
I don't love the subject. The call out has always been a source of contention for me. So,
and is it because that's the moment you realize this isn't okay?
Yes. I knew it just wasn't right in my gut. And I tried telling people, and that's why when I heard Chad was publishing a book of a lady that actually had the vision of the call out in her NDE, which actually made it more real.
Bestseller. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It made it more real and made it more probably of a bestseller.
Yeah, well,
so
in other words, in the NDE, they've got to know it's got to happen. So when I heard that, I knew it was a lie. It took me a bit to really remember, because I thought I knew Julie was a fraud from right the beginning, but I thought, how did I just know that? I didn't just hear her name and think, oh, she's a fraud. I mean, I don't know, maybe you could do that. But it was, they used her name and they say she had the vision of the call out, and I knew that was a lie. I knew it.
So Julie Rose books confirmed what Roger K. Young started.
Pretty much,
vision of the call out. And her
I wish someone could just check her book of the call out vision, because Chad put it on the internet to read right off. That was what he did first with her first book. That's where I read it, I think. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what it seems like he did. He put it out there as a press release kind of thing. And I had a friend read it, and she's like, I've read this before. It seems like, and then I thought about, wait a minute, Roger Young had a vision of that. And so I put the two and two together. I haven't had them together. Like you read one and you read the other, and maybe she wrote it. Maybe she really believed she saw that, and that's what she wrote. That's is what it is. But
man, I must be really creative to write a book in 3 weeks.
That's so fast. Wow.
And now they'll claim, some people say, oh, she just compiled other people's dreams and visions from online, yada, yada. That's all a lie. That's all a lie.
I don't want to discredit a dream. I'll be honest. I don't want to discredit anyone's dream because I believe Roger Young had that dream. I can't say he didn't have that dream.
Sure.
And I've had other people tell me they've had similar dreams. It really isn't literal. Maybe it's figurative. Sometimes we can have dreams, but it's not meant literally. I don't believe my books are ever literally, but
I'm grateful for that perspective, Suzanne, that dreams can be symbolic or even a metaphor. Although I'm not sure that's what Chad and Julie had in mind when they shared their dreams and visions. Take a listen.
Your jealousy is off the charts because I actually do see the future, because I have seen the past, because I can see what's going on in multiple dimensions and planets. So mock away.
Julie Rowe came up to Rexburg. Her books were really popular. So what happened was Garth, he said, I learned so much this weekend. He said, Julie came and stayed with us. And I learned that my dad, all his books that he wrote this whole time growing up, I thought they were all just stories, just fiction. And he said, this weekend, I learned that they were all true, that everything in those books were from dreams and visions that he has had. And I never knew that.
At the time when I wrote it, Deseret Book had rejected him and just kind of had some controversy about him. And so I felt inspired that it should be written fictionally and just not tell anybody that it's based on truth and just put it out there. And it sold really well.
So the call out was a place of contention and perhaps where things maybe started falling apart for you and Chad. He was publishing Julie Rowe's books. You disagreed with Julie and her visions. And is that the moment you started to distance yourself from Chad?
Chad distanced himself from me, actually,
Okay.
I think.
Okay.
He got tired of begging me to read her books. And he would tell me how, I don't know if I said this, but he would tell me how humble she is. She's really a humble woman. You would really like her. She's really humble.
Probably 2 years ago that Chad came to me. Now, Chad has some of his own spiritual gifts. He is also visionary. I don't say this in a bragging way, but my gifts are more extensive than his.
But I have seen some of her pictures. How do I put this? I was raised by a mentally ill mother.
Okay.
I have radar knowing who's mentally ill. And I've listened to some of her radio things, and she'd stop in mid-sentence and she'd say, oh, there's angels in here. The veil is very thin for me.
Others have just tried to say that I have mental illness. I am telling you right now that I traveled to different worlds and dimensions through light portals when I was on the other side of the veil. And I can see them on this side of the veil. This is real. Multiple probations is not going away. This is a true doctrine, a truth in the universe that will not go away. It's not leaving this planet. In fact, more and more people are going to wake up to it, Eric, which is going to dispel more of the lies
They
and the
are all the
control
time.
mechanisms. Yes. And people can call me crazy all day long. I don't give. I don't care.
You have radar for those you feel that might be suffering from mental illness.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel bad for her. It's got to be a tough thing, really, to have to take meds and they don't quite work well. And anyway.
Yeah.
Chad,
you have empathy, but you see what it is.
I do. And Chad would tell me, I mean, it's not like I never talked to him. He would say, one of her first speaking engagements was in Mesa, and he calls me and we talk, and he says, "Did you know that the stake president called Julie and told her she can't talk in a church?" And he's like, "I don't understand why." And then later I heard that they were renting the church, but I've never been able to speak in a chapel. That is not what chapels are for. You can speak in a relief society room, in a gym, but she actually spoke in the chapels. And that was not what the church wanted. And she claims she's never called in. Chad told me that she was called in to the offices because of that.
And explain that a little bit. This is a church building, not a temple, where those that are LDS worship on Sundays. And the chapel, it's more sacred than the other rooms. Can you explain that a little bit?
That's where we do our Sunday service, where we have sacrament. We
sacrament.
We have talks about, very sacred, about the scriptures, and we sing songs. And so they don't like using that room for, to run in there. It's just a quiet place that is supposed to stay sacred.
Okay. So. And there's a gym and a cultural hall and other rooms throughout the church where people can gather and use as a community building, but not in the chapel.
Right.
And so thus you're saying, though, that when Julie Rowe would speak for things that were not Sunday services, that she would speak in the chapel.
Yes. And that was a contention, but she didn't stop. She kept being told that she can't do that. And she kept speaking in chapels.
How many people were believing in, and I know you yourself weren't believing in Julie Rowe, so you were a bit separated, but I guess I'm trying to understand, how big is this group that believes part of these things or all of these things? And how would you define the group too? Is it a vow? Is it preparing to people? Is it Julie Rowe? Is it Chad Daybell followers? What is this?
I don't know how big the group is, but a lot of them are on a vow. A lot of them are Chad Daybell. If they're Chad Daybell followers, they're Julie Rowe followers, I think. She believes that multiple mortalities are true. And I think
she did a Zoom meeting on zombies last week.
How would you say inappropriate? Since people died? Why would
children being dubbed zombies, and Tammy too was a zombie named Viola before she was murdered.
I didn't believe it. I honestly thought a lot of it was what the media was making up. So I had to ask Nate Eaton. I said, "Is the zombie thing really real?" And he says, "Oh, it totally is real." Chad had emails about that. Where was I?
He wrote about zombies on a vow. He wrote about zombies on a vow.
Oh, he did? Couldn't he have been more creative and found a different name than a zombie? I mean, that I'm sorry. That just, undead or something. A zombie? I'll be honest, it sounds like a 5-year-old wrote that. What can I say?
So who's in charge of this belief system? Is it Julie Rowe's belief system? Is it Chad's belief system? Is it Roger K. Young's belief system?
It's not Roger's Young. It's not Roger Young's. He just believes in the call out and getting prepared.
Okay.
Julie, it had to be kind of from Julie. He really looked up to Julie. Julie really befriended his daughter, Emma. They were good friends. And Julie, I call it grooming, taught her that Emma had these spiritual gifts and stuff. And it became very close, which made me very worried.
So to confirm what you just said, you feel that Julie Rowe groomed Emma Daybell and taught Emma Daybell that she had special spiritual gifts.
Yes.
And where's Eric Smith in all of this too? Because you've watched Eric Smith's interview and he says he was the one that introduced multiple probations to Chad, and he was also very close to Emma Daybell and Julie Rowe.
Could be true. I never met Eric. I was out of that. I did not want to be involved in any of that. And I didn't have the time. Just didn't.
Okay. So, but you feel that this specific belief system mostly stems from Julie Rowe and Chad Daybell. Am I correct in saying that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. It's devastating to me. It's devastating. It affects my life, what's happened, because sometimes I think, could I have done more? I could have done more. I could have saved those people, those kids. I just can't believe that Chad would ever divorce. Get a divorce. If you think Lori's so wonderful, divorce Tammy. Really. Tammy's better off, Chad. I mean, honestly. People get divorced.
And I encouraged her. I was like, why don't you get a divorce? And, you probably heard that me say that.
And why not?
Because, they lose their exaltations. At least Chad would. I can't remember if she said she would, but he would.
Such a twisted idea that I don't know.
Lori Vallow had been divorced 3 times. She knew how to do it too. She could do it. I don't know why this time was different.
And Charles is the hero in this, really. He really did try to stop everything.
He did.
I look at Charles as a hero. He really is. He told anyone he could talk to, and the system failed him, really. But
he really did try many times.
In fairness, honestly, who'd believe what he was saying?
She thinks she's a resurrected being and a god, and remember the 144,000. Jesus is coming next year. She took all the money out of her bank account today. My truck had gone from the airport. She went to the airport and got it.
It seems so far-fetched that he sounded the crazy one,
Right. She believes she was married to Moroni. Is anyone LDS here? She said she was going to destroy me. Well, does that mean kill you? Yes. I don't know. Yeah, right.
So what makes her a danger to herself and to others?
Threatened me, murder me, kill me.
She threatened to murder you?
Yes. And she said,
how did she do that?
My bishop right there is in the car. He was on the phone with me today when she said, I will have you destroyed. Is what she said there.
Okay, that's not a threat to kill you.
Yesterday was a threat to kill me.
Okay. What did she say yesterday?
She said, you're not Charles. I don't know who you are, what you did with Charles, but I can murder you now with my powers.
It's hard to believe, but yet he was very serious. He really felt his life was in danger, and I see him as a hero. I do. I see him as a hero.
Mm-hmm. Did Lori and Chad really believe this? And I know you don't know Lori, but in looking at this case, something that you thought was the media skewing at first and realizing now a lot of it is true. Do you think that Chad and or Lori really believe this? Any opinions there?
That's a good question. You would think with what they did, they had to believe it. But I think with Charles's death, I think it spiraled down to where, this is just my belief, Tylee knew what really happened. And I think being was she 16 or 17?
16.
16. Being the 16-year-old, and I know 16-year-old daughters, I know what they're like, and they'll tell you anything. And
that's what people say Tylee was: honest, blunt, sassy, funny.
Yep. So I can see that she probably felt guilty about what was going on. That I know 16-year-olds, they probably said, I'm going to tell. She might have said it. And I think they had to take her out. I think that's what really happened. I think maybe they had to justify it saying, well, God told us to do this. And But I think in the end, I think that they wanted to get rid of her because they were going to tell Charles how he really died. And then I think with JJ, I really think that he was just missing Tylee. I think he was missing Tylee. And I can't believe that, but I do believe what Chad really believed is that God is on their side and they did what God told them to do, that he's creepily sitting in his truck and waiting for God to not find the kids.
Yeah.
Somehow, I think they had to create some story in their head in order to live with what they've done.
And that they chose to believe it, or that they believed it in the end, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Not excusing anything by saying that.
No.
Right. And whatever their motives were, as you point out, you thought about a motive for Tylee and JJ, that in the end, they were believing this.
Knowing that, grandparents, Kay and Larry Woodcock, would have totally taken JJ and probably would have taken Tylee if they knew that she was in danger. I know they would have,
Mm-hmm. You mentioned an interesting relationship with Julie Rowe and Emma Daybell that I'd like to go back to for a little bit. Did you ever become close to any of Chad's children? Again, I know you were busy with your own, but did you ever know any of them well?
I saw them once in a while, and mind you, the youngest was probably 3 or 4 when I first met them.
Mark.
And so I never really did anything as a family thing. I lived so far away. It was an hour and a half away, and I never really brought all my kids and, really thought about doing family things with them.
Yeah. Tell me then a little bit about this knowledge about Emma Daybell and her gifts.
Chad, I think, blogged about it a little bit. And Julie had, I think it was the earthquake she predicted that didn't happen, that she denies that happened. Anyway, and Chad backed her up like, oh, Julie never predicted an earthquake. That's when I sent the email. I'm like, I'm done with this. Why are you backing her up when she totally did predict an earthquake? She actually sent out an email having a sympathy email that like an hour or two before that she predicted it was going to happen. But when it didn't, she quickly, I don't remember, but she quickly took it down. It must have been on her website or something. But people took screenshots and.
I was criticized in May of 2016 for saying that an earthquake in the Wasatch of Utah in Salt Lake City was going to hit with a 6.7 to a 7 and I coined it the Wasatch Wake Up. I was given that phrase, that title, from my light warriors on the other side of the veil. And I'm here to tell you, I will witness to you, that is still coming.
But people started really attacking Julie over this. And Emma came back with this, don't attack my friend. She's so nice. And to write that, I mean, I respect the fact she needed to, defend her friend, but it made it sound like there's something wrong with her too.
Julie Rowe did mention that she spoke to Emma right after Tammy died that day.
She did.
That Tammy died. And with that being said, it's also interesting, the relationship that clearly Emma had with Julie. And then I also know that Eric Smith and specifically mentioned Emma.
And I go get in the car. My head of security is driving me, and I call her. And I talked to her for 40 minutes, to the daughter. Now, this is fresh. It's raw, okay? Her mom, she had just found out, 6 hours before, 4 hours before, right, that her mom had died. And her dad had never told any of the kids that he saw in vision or knew that she was going to pass away. But the first thing she asks me, and she knows my gifts and she knows her dad's gifts, the first thing she asked me is, did my dad know?
Oh, wow.
And I'm left with a choice. Do I lie or do I tell the truth? Knowing that Chad has lied to everyone already on the prepper website, saying it was a shock. And he said that at the funeral. Well, I am left with a choice, and I'm not going to lie, because I had been talking to Chad about it for 2 years, that he thought his wife was going to die. And I did energy sessions for him to release grief and all kinds of stuff, which is one of the reasons I knew, was because I do energy work. I help people release trauma energy, grief, sadness, sorrow, all those emotions. So I'm left with that choice. So what do? I said, yes, he did. And then she said, and she's sobbing, and she said, did you know? And I say, yes, I did. And I said, your dad didn't know how. I didn't know how. We were just told she would, and it would happen soon. If your dad knew how, he didn't tell me. Then she's crying and she's kind of speaking freely, and I won't go into that. And then towards the end, she says, we're about to hang up from a 40-minute conversation. And she says, you know what I'm scared about the most? And I said, what's that? And she said, my dad getting remarried.
Really?
And
Wow.
I said, why are you scared of that? And she said, because I'm not okay with polygamy, and I'm afraid because my dad told me about multiple probations. Multiple probations is the doctrine of past lives. So from October 19th until about 2 months ago, I asked the Lord every day, what did Chad tell Emma? Why is she so afraid? And what did he tell his kids about multiple probations that has her afraid he's going to get remarried? And you know what I was told? Well, I put some pieces together, because it got back to me from 3 different sources that at the funeral, contacts of mine, Chad came over to them and made a point of saying to them that he was doing okay because Tammy had been visiting him. And he made a point of making sure everybody knew that. And then he made a point of telling his kids and some other people that the reason he could move on so quickly getting married to Lori is because Tammy had come to him and had encouraged him to marry Lori.
Chad's children and Tammy's children, I loved them, and I still do. And like their oldest daughter, she's a sweetheart. And their oldest son, I knew all of them, and we spent time together, and I think they're great. I don't know where they are. Like, I think they still believe their dad's innocent. I don't know how you can see it, honestly. But I hope they know that people genuinely love them. And I'm just really sorry.
I wished I could have done more. It just hurts my heart. It's terrible. It's terrible. I never thought I'd ever know a murderer like that could be so evil and use it in the name of God, thinking that he's doing stuff that God told him to do. How could you honestly believe that how could he believe that? I just don't understand it. And I feel so sorry for the Daybell kids. I feel bad for them. I can't blame them to think that their dad couldn't do this. I can't blame them for thinking that their dad had to be framed. I can't blame them. How could your mind go to where you knew your dad, he raised them, and I do know he used to tell me that Garth was a handful. Their oldest.
As a toddler, or his whole life?
Oh, he was glad to see him go on his mission. He was that hard. That's what he told me. And
really?
Oh yeah. So Garth was kind of bucking his dad, which is normal. My oldest son that went on his mission, him and his dad fought a lot, but his dad was weird. Sorry. My ex-husband's got some problems.
Do you know if any of these children were closer to Tammy, or was that really not something you understood?
Oh, I think they all were close to Tammy, but I don't know so much. But
yeah,
I loved Tammy. I did every time I saw her, which I didn't have as much interaction with her as I did with Chad. But I think the very last interaction I had with Tammy was Chad was at a preparedness expo selling books. It was after Julie. But one of the last conversations I had with Tammy was at a preparedness expo, and I went there. I was telling Tammy, I said, there's something wrong with Julie. And she's like, what do you mean? What do you mean? And I think Chad was calling her over or something, so she had to leave. And that was the very last conversation. I said, there's something not right. Pretty much every time I saw her, she had her kids with her, other than that first meeting. So she was mainly, she took care of the kids and stuff. But what I knew of Tammy, she was the heart of the business, that's for sure. And she was just a sweetheart. And she wanted to, support her husband and Julie and stuff. So she wouldn't have believed me because she's met Julie. She knew Julie, that sort of thing. But
do you think when you say that she wouldn't have believed you, do you think she fully believed or understood her husband's belief system? Or do you think she was just a supporter of her husband?
I think she was a supporter. I don't think she knew everything he believed. I don't. I think that's why she became dark, is because she didn't believe. I don't believe that she believed in multiple mortalities, because I think a lot of people say that Tammy didn't go to a lot of those preparedness expos.
She didn't. She didn't. In fact, you even saying you saw her at one, I thought, oh, she was there for one.
I saw her at one. Chad almost always was there. He would go. So,
yeah, I've confirmed through a really good source that Lori was not his first affair. But beyond my source, Chad allegedly told Julie about an emotional affair he had. Listen to this interview on Jay for Justice's channel.
I know of at least one other woman that he was in contact with that Tammy was upset about, and that was texting, and she tried to get a hold of me too. That's what I find interesting is that lady, she also lives in Arizona, that lady and Lori and Melanie and Zulema, like that whole group that's involved with Melanie, the nieces, Brandon stuff, they all tried to contact me in 2018, 19, and mostly in 2018. And the other lady that was in Arizona that he was having an emotional affair with, that's what I call it. I knew they were in contact. She had emailed him initially first, and they were in contact. And I know he was actually angry, very heartbroken and angry over that, because she basically cut him off after her husband found texts between the two of them and threatened Chad that he would expose him publicly if he didn't leave his wife alone. So I had not only big red flags, but I heard that personally from Chad. Chad told me that.
And so I personally suspect that he didn't take her to these conferences on purpose. That would make sense to me. Who knows though?
And that makes me so sad. Tammy didn't deserve that. She was an abused woman. She was an abused woman, and he murdered her. She was abused. And if you don't look at domestic violence with her, I think that needs to be discussed, because she was a victim of domestic violence.
Thank you for sharing that.
She was spiritually abused. She was emotionally abused about the game thing. I can't see Tammy having an addiction playing a game very often.
Frontierville.
Oh my gosh. And he used it, well, your grandma. Why would her grandma visit him and not her?
Chad said that Tammy's grandmother, Lucille, visited him and told him to yell at Tammy and swear at her to stop playing her video game so that she could do the work of her ancestors and stop being so lazy, essentially. That's the story you're referring to.
What kind of angel does that? I'm so mad. I'm so mad. It just makes me so mad that he's such a, I won't even say it. And I'm not a swearing woman. I just can't believe anybody could. He is the dumbest murderer I have ever heard. And if this wasn't so many people died, it would be funny. It's not funny, but it's so ridiculous. So ridiculous. Couldn't he have any sense in his head to think, oh, zombies? Why is the spirit telling me about zombies? There's got to be something wrong with that. Why couldn't he just question what he was hearing?
Chad calls and says, hey, I want to let you know that I did some research and figured out that this Ned Schneider, thank you. and then Schneider is in him. And she was taken back a little bit because it was a new concept for her. She didn't know about that this could happen. So this was introduced from Chad. Absolutely 100% sure of that.
I'm so angry over that.
I agree with you about Tammy being a victim of domestic abuse,
She is.
violence, and murdered. I don't think we talk about that enough.
No, we don't. Because it is violence and it is domestic violence. And she was abused. Like we just talked about the video games. I cannot see Tammy playing video games for very long. What?
How did she even have time? Right.
Right. 1 or 2 hours. Her husband couldn't run a business to take care of the whole family. She had to work. I'm so mad over that. It just, because I'm getting my feelings out right now, aren't I?
That's good. That's good.
Because
that's what Hidden True Crime is there for.
I knew them. I knew them. I knew them. And Chad telling me that they were, soulmates. And that picture of him playing the ukulele or whatever that thing is, and her doing the hula dancing at their wedding, and oh my gosh.
Lori and Chad in Hawaii.
Oh, it infuriates me. How could anyone do that? Good heavens. I mean, you don't have to get married to have sex. Just go have sex if you really need it that bad. Honestly. It's just so disgusting. Knowing that those kids are dead, Tammy's dead, Charles is dead, and they're out there celebrating, doing the hula. Oh, that's just awful.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. I agree that it is awful. Your anger validated.
I wish I could just erase all of it. I wish I didn't know Chad. I wish none of this happened. I wish I could have done something. And there's sweet Heather, and I have a friend that knows her, that we're close high school friends. And
Heather Daybell.
Yes, I'm sure she's feeling the same way I'm feeling, is that she wished she could have done more. And she did a lot, I've heard. I don't know exactly, but
she did. She tried to warn people like you warned people.
My heart hurts for her because that's family. Can you imagine? Oh my gosh. I'm just so grateful I didn't get caught up in one iota. I wasn't invited to preparing of people. Wasn't invited at all. I didn't stroke their ego.
I'm gonna take this a bit further and ask you your thoughts. I know that you're divorced, and we won't get into your personal life story, but you made this decision with 10 children to get divorced and move into the next chapter of your life. And you see Tammy as an abused woman who died by, her husband's hands. Your LDS, and your hope is to be a social worker and help. You are not the only one who saw Chad as someone that was perhaps humble and maybe a just fine husband.
By all appearances, Chad was a good husband, and he was kind to her. They'd sit on the couch and hold hands,
Okay.
And he was kind to me.
I thought he was a great husband and a great dad. I wished I could have had a man like that. This is what I was thinking when I knew him.
Wow. So what is it then? People didn't listen to you. People didn't listen to Heather Daybell. Heather Daybell, for those learning, is Chad Daybell's sister-in-law and a neighbor or someone that lived nearby. People didn't listen to her either. What was it that people needed to see or understand when it came to Chad and Tammy's relationship, or what Tammy was dealing with? Were there red flags? Was there something we could have seen, or have you even thought about that?
I haven't really thought about it, but the culture really is, in LDS culture, is men Men have the priesthood. Women have to support their husbands in the priesthood. And divorce is really frowned on. I really don't like going to church, partly because I don't feel like I fit in anywhere, because I'm not a family anymore, basically is what they say.
It's harder for you now than as a divorce.
Very, very hard. And my kids aren't invited to like the scout things. It's really weird to me. I've had other single moms say that. It's almost like we have leprosy or something. Maybe other wards are better than other churches. Wards is what we call them, are better. But my experience so far has not been pleasant.
We are holding the first Rexburg.
Let's go back to the Jameses for a second. You brought up Nancy James as someone that you feel is complicit.
And our theme is uplifting the downtrodden and healing the brokenhearted, which we all can relate to, right?
I'm just very honored to be part of the conference.
I do,
And that-
100%.
Okay. They gave Chad a platform. They say now that they didn't know him very well.
They moved to Idaho for him. And they started this preparing the people for him.
Chad's one of my favorite people. In fact, he used to be in Springville, and then we followed him to Rexburg.
I don't believe that they, for a minute, that they didn't know what Chad was doing. I believe they knew it. I don't believe they knew that he killed children. I don't believe that the conspiracy that they knew Chad, of course, Charles, but I believe they knew a lot of his things that the LDS Church doesn't believe. I believe they know.
Yeah, tell me about that. They mentioned in an interview once that they followed Chad Daybell up to Rexburg. Do you know more than that, though? Did they tell you anything about moving there for him or why?
They told me, what she told me is somehow I saw her at I think it was the Firm Foundation and event. And she's like, oh, yeah, we moved to Idaho. And we saw Julie. I think I had mentioned this earlier, that they saw Julie. And Julie said, yeah, I knew you would. Oh my gosh, she's like, talk about predicting after the fact.
Right.
That's what she does.
That is true is that Mike James wanted me to do preparing the people and Nancy James did not. I know this to be true because the Lord himself told me this, showed me this, and I do have gifts and I could see remotely, because I can do remote viewing, that Chad was talking shit on me, Sean Little Bear was talking shit on me, Mike and Nancy James talk shit on me.
It's hard for me because people have seen what Julie does and they assume I'm like her. And that's not fair. I'm not like her. There's a lot of vicious people out there and they would attack me. Oh my gosh. It was quite abusive. I took a lot of abuse because of, if I said, call it might not be real. Oh my gosh, don't. And that's where then they're not really living Christian lives, is if they attack you personally.
It reminds me of a quote. When an abuser can no longer control you, they want to control how others see you.
Mm-hmm.
Chad also mentioned later on that Julie was jealous of Lori.
Because Julie Rose, the one that brought this whole emotion code and energy work and all that, she's the one that really opened that up. And then he switched from being with that one lady, SUZANNE Freeman, and then he dumped her. I call it dump because he just kind of moved from one person to the other. And they went to Julie Rowe, and then he dumped Julie Rowe, and then he went to Lori. So he kind of kept doing this. Probably for money, he's really into his books, so he wanted to make money, and I've learned that he made a lot of money off Julie books. Oh, there's evil spirits starting to work on Tammy now. Tammy's good, but they're not in her yet. They're like working on her. And they're coming around the house, something like that, and then she had this knock at the door one night, and Tammy wakes up to go see who it is, and of course Chad and Lori would say, oh, that was Julie Rose's spirit that came and knocked on the door.
Okay,
That sound
you
familiar?
lost me right there. Let me ask you about Tammy then.
She's starting to question if he's seen somebody else.
Or
No,
Tammy
was.
was,
That's what she
right.
would tell. So that's how they knew the evil spirits were in her. Is because now she was starting to, and I don't remember what she said. Something like, "Are you seeing another woman?" Something maybe like that.
And there's one thing about not being happy in your marriage, and Who knows? Maybe Tammy was obsessed with playing the video game and she played it hours and hours. I can't see that. She worked full time.
We are going to end here tonight. Please join us next week, a week from today, for TGIF to hear Suzanne's interview part 2. You do not want to miss it. Trust me, a lot more is coming. I want to thank the YouTube channels whose clips I was able to use tonight: Zav Girl, J for Justice, Eyes Open, and the Julie Rowe channel. We'll have a link to all of those channels in the description of this video. And speaking of the description of this video, check there for winners of last week's giveaway. You'll find them there. I'm going to end tonight with something a little bit different, in keeping with Suzanne's desire to dedicate her interview to Tammy Daybell and have her interview be in Tammy's memory. I wrote a tribute a couple of years ago, well, almost 2 years ago. It was October 2020, and I want to share that with you all tonight. Suzanne, thank you for being an incredible human being and for being a wonderful hidden gem. Thank you for sharing what you know. We'll join all of you next week here at Hidden True Crime to hear the rest of what Suzanne has to say. This last week, an important date passed. October 19th marks 1 year since Chad's wife, Tammy Daybell, died. John and I have been thinking a lot about her, and I wrote a tribute for her. I felt she deserved a voice, and I want to share with you before we end what I wrote. This last week marks 1 year since Tammy Daybell died. Chad claims Tammy passed in the middle of the night last October in her sleep. We still don't know how Tammy died, but we can all guess why she died. We can only hope that it was peaceful. Tammy is a victim we don't hear a lot about. Her children have avoided any interviews, and her parents have mostly remained quiet, requesting to grieve privately, but also sharing that they hope justice is served swiftly, that they are suffering and will suffer for years to come due to the loss of their daughter and sister. It was uplifting news to hear on the first anniversary of Tammy's death that her family started a foundation in her name, the Tammy Douglas Daybell Foundation. They say it will honor her love of service and literacy and give children the opportunity to love the written word. Tammy seems to have lived a quiet life. Don't get me wrong, from all accounts, she was vibrant and ready to help anyone who was in need. She had her opinions and seemed quite independent. In addition to raising 5 children, who friends say she loved more than anything in the world, she showed her compassion for animals, including a quirky love for ducks. She loved her job as a school librarian and worked hard to run her family's publishing company. When I say she lived quietly, from what I can tell, she was content to live in her husband's shadow, working hard to support his dreams and her family's dreams. She was secondary. Others' needs came before her own. While friends say how positive she always was, I sense it's because she quietly kept her personal hardships and concerns to herself. When I say Tammy lived a quiet life, I mean she left a lot unsaid. The public is left guessing with plenty of evidence to assess. Knowing how much was on her plate, 5 kids, 2 jobs, serving in her church and community, running the household, I don't know how Tammy would have ever found time to enjoy the online game Frontierville. I can assume she found some solace and a way to escape by playing. Chad let the world know about this habit of his wife, and he saw no benefit. Chad wanted Tammy wasting no time pretending to be a pioneer, but rather researching real pioneers, her ancestors, with any free time she might have. According to Chad, after he told Tammy to stop playing the game, she hesitated. But as Chad explained, she finally obeyed his demands after he told Tammy that her deceased grandmother Lucille appeared in a vision, angry at her granddaughter. Chad told Tammy what Lucille's spirit told him, and I quote, "I told you to have Tammy quit her damn computer game cold turkey so she would be receptive to a message from me, but she didn't. Tell her she has more important work to do than play games." Grandma Lucille yelled angrily beyond the veil. Tammy finally stopped after Chad shared his vision. I wonder if Tammy ever told anyone this story. I wonder if it would have been another thing left unsaid in her life if Chad had not decided to share the story of shaming her so publicly. I wonder just how much was left unsaid. There is an engagement photo of Chad and Tammy. Tammy was either 19 or 20. It's an eerie photo now, filled with an awful irony, as their chosen location for the engagement shoot was in a cemetery among headstones. They both look so cheerful. I sense in Tammy her naivety. I can imagine her idealistic view of marriage and the hope she felt for a future life with Chad Daybell. I likely sense these things because it's all too familiar. I too was naive and idealistic and full of so much hope on my first wedding day. Like Tammy, I was married in the LDS temple to a man of my faith. The man I married was a righteous man, a church-attending man, a rule follower, and a spiritual hero to many. He was also a man who yelled at me when I was late to church, told me angrily that he felt he had to carry all of the spiritual weight in our relationship, and shamed me for not being a better helpmeet. It was a helpmeet he wanted, not a partner. And me, this independent, feisty Venus flytrap, I was a studious pupil, learning all I could about being a delicate flower. I quit my career as a TV reporter. Not that money wasn't needed, it definitely was, but a less threatening career as a nanny seemed a safer choice. I learned to cook and I cleaned, yet my submissiveness was never enough. He was always moving the goalpost, and no matter what I did, I could never meet his expectations. Just like Tammy, I enjoyed an online game to pass the time. It was sort of numbing, and I didn't know what else to do. It was a virtual escape when a real escape felt impossible. I felt I had no other options. Like Tammy, I was taught that if I loved the Lord and my husband loved the Lord, we could make it work. I was taught that if something was broken, you fix it. I was taught that it was near sinful, or at the very least shameful, to throw away a marriage ordained of God. I had been taught as a young girl by Sunday school teachers that a good marriage is trusting my husband, letting him take the lead, and letting him make the decisions. I was taught that my grandmother was a saint because she put up with my grandpa who was difficult. She was praised for staying with him. I was taught about how women were God's gifted nurturers. I felt it was my responsibility to create a peaceful, happy home, and that it was my fault if it wasn't this way. My favorite scriptures were about loving others. I strived to always love my neighbor, but more importantly, I needed to love my husband, and I needed to forgive, and to forgive again. It took 2 years for me to realize it wasn't my husband I had to continue forgiving. I had to forgive myself for making the wrong choice. It was only 2 years of my life, but it was still 2 years. I could have left on the honeymoon when he told me he'd made a mistake marrying me. I could have left a few months later after he drove me to the airport, threatening to fly me back home to my parents because I was being difficult. When he told me that he wanted children, just not my children, I did leave. But he convinced me to come back. You can't just fight off all those Sunday school lessons. It's not that easy. Not to mention, my grandmother was a saint. I could try to be a saint too. I was 33 when I got married the first time. So with life experience, a career, and independence in my tool belt, 2 years in, I found the confidence to divorce. My story has a happy ending. I found true love. I found love with someone who doesn't want a helpmeet, but a partner. I found love with someone who doesn't share my same faith, but who respects me. I found love with someone who prefers Venus flytraps over violets. I married someone who, rather than silence me, encourages me. John helped me find my voice and to say the things that shouldn't be left unsaid. Escaping Emotional Abuse is the title of my memoir, a book I published. I wanted to finally say it all, and John encouraged me the entire way. There is no doubt in my mind that Tammy was an emotionally abused woman for years, decades. Marrying so young at the age of 20, she didn't have the tools I did. I think about that a lot. I think about it because I really believe that if I had married at 20 instead of 33, I might not have found a way out. Tammy's story ends in absolute tragedy. Her loyalty and compassion, dedication and forgiveness, her selflessness cost her her life. Her life is that of a literal martyr, sacrificing it all and saying nothing. The day before Tammy died, on October 18th, 2019, her good friend and coworker noticed Tammy was acting differently at work. Mandy Fowler said that her usually positive friend was acting frustrated. It was far from typical Tammy. Mandy will always wonder what was on her friend's mind. So will I. I wish she had found her voice that day. So much was left unsaid. Tammy, I never had a chance to meet you, but I feel like I did. I wish we could have talked. Everything you left unsaid, you could have said it to me, and I would have listened. Rest in peace, Tammy Douglas Daybell. Just like your family, your parents and siblings, we stand by them with the hope that justice is served swiftly. Good night.